Hey guys, it's Chris with the Bets team, and today we are talking about buying a home. So we're going to talk through the process from start to finish, and we have a very special guest, Lisa Seversyke with Global State Mortgage, is joining us today. So we're just going to have kind of an open dialogue and honest conversation about the process of getting pre-approval, going through the financing, what we do when we're looking for homes, and going all the way through to the day you get your keys, sign your mortgage, and become a homeowner. What a real estate agent does, our job through the process, whether we're listing a home or buying a home, we're looking at advocating for our clients. So we're looking on the sell side, we're trying to get the most money for our listings. We're trying to get the most eyes on the listing as possible. We're on the buy side. We want to have access to all the homes. So we're part of the local MLS organizations to have access to those. So we're actually members of 3 MLS organizations. Heart of Iowa, which is north central Iowa, basically from Ames to Mason City. The Ames MLS, which is the Ames metro area essentially, and then Des Moines, which covers an even broader area with a lot of the smaller towns going all the way out to even Marshalltown, west to Adel and so forth. So
really kind of what you're saying, Chris, is that like if you're looking for a house, if you're a buyer and you're in the market, like you need to pick your agent and
yeah,
then you can show them houses all over central Iowa,
that's a
basically,
fantastic
right?
point. Yes, that's a very good point. So that's having a realtor is gaining access to really any listing. So whether it's a for sale by owner, we work with them often. We can handle those showings, negotiate for you on your behalf, and advocate for you through the buying process, just like any other property, or any listed property. We can gain access to those through the multiple listing service. So yes, we can really, if there's a property out there, that's what we're doing. We're gaining
So
access
even
to
if
that.
I'm a buyer, so I'm picking my buyer's agent, right? I've picked you as my buyer's agent. And I see a for sale by owner house.
Yep.
Instead of being like, oh, I need to call that person,
Yep.
I could actually come to you first, right? And potentially you could help me out.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So we do that all the time. State law now, we're going to be required to have buyer's agency agreements. So that says that we will represent you in any of the buying processes, regardless of what property it is. So we'll use that in that situation, and we'll go represent you with really any property that's out there. So on the buying agent side, our job, like we were saying, was get access to properties. We advise you through the home buying process. So it's the day we get to an offer. We're going to walk through that purchase agreement start to finish. We'll typically do a consult ahead of time, so you see the forms, you know what's going on, the process of getting a lender involved. You talk to Lisa, you get your pre-approval. There's a lot of stuff that we do on the front end, and then the day that we actually get to a purchase, we find the house that you really want. It's negotiating that purchase. It's going through the terms that make sense for your financing, your timeline for buying the home, your financial situation, your loan program type. We factor all those in to negotiate the best deal on that property. Once we get an accepted offer, we're going to be going through the home inspection with you. Typically, we have 7 to 10 business days to conduct that. Advise you on the best, situation of how to get things resolved that are discovered in a home inspection. Even a great brand new home usually has something that needs to get resolved. All the way through to where she takes over with the appraisal and actually closing the loan. So I always tell my buyers the most important thing after the home inspection period is just to keep open and honest conversations with your lender to make sure that she has what she needs to actually get your loan closed on time the day of closing. So anything you want to add on the lending side of the process there?
Yeah, no, so as Chris talked about, so as you're decided on who your buyer's agent is, so you're using Chris and his team to help you find a house. So what they're going to want from you is a pre-approval. So they're going to want to know that unless you're paying cash for the house, they want to know that your financing is all set up and you're ready to go. So getting your pre-approval is filling out an application. We're going to take a look at how you're paid, where your income is coming from. We're looking at, are you looking at a down payment? Do you need a down payment assistance program to help you out? Maybe you have a house that you've listed with the Bets team and now you need to sell it, so you've got some net proceeds. So we're going to help calculate, we'll work with Chris's team on how we're going to calculate your net proceeds, so to determine how much money you're looking to put into the transaction.
Yeah.
So
And are we subject to sell?
are you subject
We
to
got to work out
sale
the
or not
timing and
subject to sale,
logistics.
right?
Yeah.
So as we have your financing, we're going to decide between your budget what your purchase price is, and where that puts you is the homes that you're going to put that you're going to be looking at with Chris and his team is that purchase price, because you don't want to go in and think that you're looking at a $400,000 house and I can only approve you for a $300,000 house, because those
Yep.
houses look a lot different, right?
It does, and it's nothing worse than a buyer looking at $400,000 houses and then setting expectations at that, and then we look at $300,000 houses, which are great houses, but they're usually not going to be,
Yeah.
at the same level. So it's setting expectations up front, setting realistic expectations for the buyer, and going to homes that you can afford, and
And that you want to make
it's
a
a better
payment on
experience
too.
overall. Yeah,
So I think that
it's not always what you can get a pre-approved for.
right.
It's what you actually are comfortable paying on a monthly basis, and that's
Correct. So that's why I like your budget and determining where you want your monthly payment to be with principal and interest, taxes, insurance, and potentially mortgage insurance. All those things factor into your payment. So we want that to be where you feel comfortable. Because I always tell people, I don't know your lifestyle. So you want to have your home payment. Maybe you've been renting, or maybe you're upgrading in your house, or whatever it is. I don't know how many times you go out to eat, or like if you have kids, what their sports activities cost or anything like that. So
Yeah.
you're the person who knows how much you want your total housing payment to be.
exactly.
So
And great example on the tax piece of it. We're looking with a client right now at Ames versus Ankeny, and the two properties have a $2,000 difference in taxes.
right.
And so, he's looking at a budget that's this, and the taxes are $200 a month extra for the Ames house versus the Ankeny house in that situation. So, today we're talking about it'd be a better deal monthly for him to buy the Ankeny house, and it's the taxes. It's no different on the loan program or anything.
Right.
The price of the two houses is basically identical.
Just the
It's
taxes
just
are
the
different.
taxes are different. So,
Yeah. So that's that communication too that we were talking about.
yes.
Just keeping in communication. So with the pre-approval, I would also say that there's different types of financing.
Yep.
So another thing that Chris is really interested in is what loan program you're doing for the house. So if we're looking at a USDA, FHA, VA loan, the appraisal is going to be different. And so so I always let Chris know, hey, this is the loan program we're looking at, because Chris is going to show you a house, and on those 3 programs, they're going to be looking at peeling, cracking, chipping paint. They're going to be looking at things like some handrails. They're going to be looking at
Life safety issues.
there's
Yeah.
safety issues of the house. Is the roof? Is there curling, missing shingles on the house? So knowing that that's the loan program that you're looking at helps out Chris when he's taking you to look at houses, to find out if they're going to qualify for the loan program, or if maybe it can be fixed, or what the situation is.
Yeah, it really guides our offer process, and sometimes we need to ask the seller for things. Other times my buyer is like, yeah, I'm okay painting a garage that has some chip and peeling paint on it. We'll take care of that. So we want to let the seller know that that's part of our offer, that they're willing to do that up to so many dollars of, renovation essentially on the property before it becomes theirs. So every deal is different, but that loan program really dictates a lot about how we offer and what we offer.
So it's really important to get that pre-approval.
It's huge.
When you're looking
Yeah.
for a house, like those are one of those things that you don't want to just be like, oh, I'll just do it at some point.
Exactly.
It's one of the first things that you need to get done so that you feel comfortable on your budget and the loan program, and it helps when you're looking at the house.
I mean, great example, USDA. There's only certain towns around central Iowa that are eligible for USDA. You got to get out of the metro area and into the more rural towns. But Gilbert qualifies, Huxley qualifies, Polk City qualifies. All these towns just outside the metro. Elkhart. Maybe you can't use it in Ankeny, but you can use it in Elkhart, and it's a good program, 0% down program. So that loan pre-approval tells us a lot. If you only qualify for USDA, then we got to go look in those towns. If you qualify for conventional, we can do a lot more and have a lot more flexibility in what we look at, how we look at it. So. And then another unique program that Lisa has at her disposal is the 203K, which we've done several of those, and that's actually where you can buy the house for X number of dollars and set a budget for renovations, and that money will actually be given to a qualified contractor to do the work, and you just close on it like a normal 30-year mortgage. So if you're not comfortable doing work to a property, but you can get a good deal, build some equity, and have a contractor do the work, you can get the house that you want, maybe for less money. And it's all financed into a traditional 30-year mortgage.
Yeah, the renovation loan, it's not a loan that a lot of people know about. Chris
not a lot
is
of
great.
banks have access to it.
Right,
Yeah.
and we do quite a few of them. And Chris is really great because he knows a lot of contractors to help you out, because that's a big part of the program. But the program can be used from anything to you want to add on to the house, you want to change over a bathroom or add like the basement's not finished and you're looking at a house, but you really want to have a finished basement. It's a program that can be used for that, like really big things that you want to do. We did a project together where literally a wall's being moved. They opened up the kitchen and redid the flooring. Or it can be used for something as simple as you're looking at a house and you want a fence in the backyard. Maybe you and somebody, maybe there was dogs in the house, you want all the hardwood floors in there. It can take those things out and do a very simple thing to renovate that home as well.
As long as we're adding value.
As long as we're at value. He's got it.
So it's always a little more work for Lisa and I on a program like that because we have to establish that we're buying it for this, we're doing these renovations, and the property is going to be worth more to the bank when it's all said and done to give you the money. So it's a little more labor intensive, but it's a really good program, and we've used that probably 6 or 8 times in the last couple of years with various clients and various situations. So it's been a really nice tool in the tool belt that not a lot of people are familiar with.
Yeah,
so.
It's just an option. Like we love to our clients to have options in their home buying process.
Yeah, options are really important, and it's I love working with Lisa because she has so many resources at her disposal and can get you into a loan program that is really right for you. They're not trying to slam you into a little box. There's a lot of great local banks, and sometimes that box is the right fit, but a lot of times they're trying to fit you into a box that maybe isn't the best solution for you, and that's what Lisa's really good about working with clients, to find the best solution so you end up with the best mortgage program for what you want to accomplish in your home buying. So Lisa, let's talk real quick. What all goes into getting a pre-approval for a buyer?
Sure. So it's super simple, and I love it at a closing when people are like, man, that was so much easier than what I thought, because I think people have misconceptions about what it looks like. So we get your application, which we can do it a couple different ways. You can, we have an app, you can do it. We can be as simple and electronic as you want us to be, or we literally have people nowadays that
Bring in
want
your stack of papers.
They bring us our stack of papers, or they want to meet with us, or sometimes even after they've filled out everything, they still want to come in and meet with us. So we're completely fine with however you like to work with people. So the pre-approval, so we get your application filled out. We want your income documentation, your asset documentation. So it's like W-2s for a year or two, your pay stubs for a month, 2 months of your assets is kind of typically what we're looking for. If you're self-employed, it's 2 years of your federal taxes. Things like that. That's the documentation that we need. If somebody's not asking you for documentation, you're really not pre-approved. So some people are like, well, such and such didn't ask me for this. And I'm like, well, then they haven't verified any of your information.
And it can be as simple as you're working overtime, and can the overtime be qualified? So even if you're a W-2 employee, there's variable forms of income sometimes that could impact your pre-approval amount. Maybe they can only use
Correct, because you're thinking,
salary.
oh, this is what I make.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, well, you've only been getting that for a year. And so
bonuses, overtime,
right.
Commission above your W-2, those are all variable forms of income that she may or may not be able to use in actually getting you qualified.
So it's really important to turn in and to be, just so you know, we are going to see everything. And so I'm telling people, like, you can't white out things or anything like that. Just give us your information because we're going to know what it is anyway. Yep. But so
all your bank account information.
Yeah,
don't hide that bank account over there.
Don't be blacking out your account number. It's on your checks anyway if you use a check. Yep. So we're going to be looking at, one of the first things we're going to be looking at is your credit score.
Yep.
So that's what some people are nervous about. Other people are different. So just on that level, if you're looking at your Credit Karma, that is your consumer credit score. That is not your mortgage credit score. So you have different credit scores. Like if you go buy an auto loan, that's a different credit score. Your insurance has a different credit score. Yep. If you're getting your credit card, that's a different credit score. Those are all lower or higher. Those are all higher than what your mortgage credit score is. So your mortgage credit score, it's usually one of the biggest purchases you make, although autos are kind of close these days. But it's going to be, the algorithm for that is a lot more strict. So your mortgage credit score is always going to be lower than what you're seeing on Credit Karma. So that's why we pull that. We're going to be looking at that. That's going to pull in all of your debts. So we're going to go over them with you, make sure that all your debts, there are some banks that don't report. So we always kind of go over, make sure everything is being reported. And then your debt to income ratio. So We're going to be looking at those debts that import in, and then we're going to say we're going to be looking at your pay stubs or your taxes to make sure about your income to calculate then your debt to income ratio. So that's a big part of a lot of these programs, and where your purchase price is going to be is calculating that debt to income ratio.
Yep. And where credit score wise, where do they need to be generally for a mortgage?
Yep. So it used to be that 720 was like, woohoo, and it's still a good credit score. But now, like over 760 is considered excellent. Then you're 740, then you're 720. We can actually go down. We have programs that go down to a 580 credit score.
That's awesome.
So it opens up the door for a lot of people that aren't, that it's not just perfect. And so those things that affect your credit score are, you want to make sure your payments are made on time. That's like a really, really big one. Your ratio of the limit on your credit cards to what you owe. So that has been, in the last few years, has really affected people's credit score. So if you have a credit card where you have a $1,000 limit on your credit card, and you're using over $300, so your best credit score is going to come when you're using 30% of whatever that limit is.
Yeah.
So if you're over $300, your credit's going to get hit a little bit. Over 50%, it gets hit more. And when you get up to that 70 and 90%, people's credit scores start
It makes a huge
being
difference.
affected.
Yeah.
It makes a huge.
I mean, I found that out personally when we
Yeah.
were doing ours. I added a corporate business card and put my business expenses on there, and my credit actually went up even though I was spending the same amount of money. It was just not maxing out the credit limit on different cards.
Correct. And so some people decide like, oh, I'm going to, so closing a card also affects your credit. It makes it go down for a while if you close something out because they want to see what you're going to do. It's better to have 2 cards and have them at 30% than to have one at 60%, which I know seems crazy, but that's the algorithm.
If somebody's been working on their credit or feels like they need to work on their credit, is that something that you can help with?
Oh my gosh, yes. We help people all the time. So we can do what's called a soft pull on your credit just to see where you sit. And then we can actually have a tool that we can analyze your credit a bit, and we can help you kind of walk through that. And if you're in a situation where you really need a lot of help, we do have some credit agencies, like credit repair agencies, that we can just refer you to.
That's awesome.
But a lot of times, if people have the gumption to pick up the phone and make a call, you can actually do it yourself even.
Okay. One thing I mentioned too with Lisa in particular, she's really good about communicating if she's going to do a hard pull. If she can get what she needs with a soft pull, she'll start the conversation. So a lot of my clients that are early in the shopping process and trying to figure things out will talk to Lisa and get an idea of if their file is going to be complicated enough that you need to do a hard pull to get more detail.
Right.
And that's really nice, right? Because a lot of times when you go to maybe a local bank or an online lender, they do a hard pull immediately. And my clients are always shocked that oh my gosh, I just got a notice. The other thing that's really important is you do have a 2-week shopping window where you can have your mortgage, your credit score pulled for a mortgage pre-approval, and you can have multiple banks looking at everything, and you're not going to get dinged. Whereas if you wait like a month and go to another lender and you keep doing that, they're going to keep thinking you're looking at additional asset purchases.
Right.
And it's going to impact your credit score more. So that's been something that's come up in conversation quite a bit lately.
think. And so I think also there's some lenders out there that kind of almost scare you into like, oh, after you've talked to me, you can't even talk to somebody else because of that.
Yeah.
And that's not true. And the other thing I think you need to be aware of is, so once somebody does do a hard pull, there's actually some legislation going on right now. But once you do a hard pull, like your lender is selling your information, but the credit bureaus sell your information. And so I know like with us, sometimes a lot of people, I always tell them, I'm like, okay, so once I do pull your credit, you could get contacted multiple times. And some of the lenders are pretty shady out there, and they represent themselves to be us or somebody. They'll even use our name sometimes. And so I think communication, whoever you choose as a lender, it's really imperative that they're really communicating with you and letting you know what's going on.
Yeah.
If you're going to get those phone calls or emails, I always tell people, like, if you think it's shady, then call me back, or, because I'm going to call you from, I only have I only have 2 numbers and I only have an assistant. So like, if it's something that you feel uncomfortable with, then just call me back and make sure it's me.
It makes a huge difference too. We're talking about things that go into an offer, and you need to have that pre-approval, right? That's the most important thing. But the next step to that, if we're in multiple offer situation, or even if we're on a house that's priced well and they want to know they're going to have a deal that closes, they're going to want to know it's a local lender. They're going to want to know that lender is pre-approved you, vetted your income sources, and actually done a good job on your file. And Lisa does a ton of business, so when we provide a pre-approval from her office in a transaction, it carries a lot more weight than if you'd gone online and got some online lender. And we've had several clients here recently that maybe went online first and they weren't real comfortable with the explanation from that lender about their payment, their cost structure. They didn't really know where they stood, and Lisa was able to clear that up for them, which was a huge help in those transactions and getting those people further along in their home journey of actually being able to buy something and understand their budget.
I think when Chris using the word understanding is really, really important. So I think, the BETS team is going to help you understand buying the house and the house in general. The financing side, I think it's really important to understand a little bit of this is your credit, this is your payment, because in the end, you're the one that's having that deducted from your checking savings account. And so understanding that process is one thing my office prides itself on, I guess, is that you understand what's going on throughout the process.
It's a big purchase.
It is.
So you really got to feel comfortable with it, right? It's probably the biggest purchase of your life when you buy a house for most people. And so if you know where your payment's going to be and you feel good about that payment, it's a lot more comfortable when you go to write an offer that you can afford that house. Right. There's nothing worse than not knowing. And if you're in a multiple offer situation too, you need to know, am I comfortable going higher, or are we just going to make our best offer
and then we're going to walk away if it doesn't work out? Yep.
So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. But that's really the most important piece, is being comfortable with the lender, being comfortable with the realtor, being comfortable with the offers that you're eventually going to write, and having those professionals guide you through that process. So we've been having, with a strong market right now, we've been having a lot of questions about how do we get into our first home? Are there assistance programs out there? So maybe Lisa can hit on that a little bit about what's out there for first-time home buyers or just home buyers in general from an assistance standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that first-time home buyers, so just to put out there, just to clarify, first of all, USDA, FHA are not just first-time home buyer programs, which I think that's kind of a misnomer out there, that they're only for a first-time home buyer.
It's definitely a misconception out there.
It is, yeah. So I think that just putting that one out there. And then we do, though, have a lot of first-time homebuyer programs. Down payment seems to be one of the biggest obstacles that a lot of first-time homebuyers have right now.
Yeah, how do we come up with the cash?
How do you come with the cash?
Yeah.
So our first option that I think gives you the best program and the best interest rates and all that kind of thing is usually if you have gift funds. Okay. So we find a lot of times that maybe grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle or something are thinking about, like, whether it's their inheritance or something, and they're willing to give it to them beforehand.
Sure.
Because they're looking to buy a house, and they just feel it's a good feeling, right, to give it to somebody who's then purchasing their first home. So it's a tax deduction for them. You get it for the house. It's a super simple process, but gift funds are allowed on almost all the programs that we do.
Any sort of limits on those?
No.
Okay.
So if you are actually even a gift of equity, if you're buying a house that like your dad owns or your mom owns or something, they can even give you a gift of equity. There's so many options out there I think people don't always recognize.
The gift of equity one's really cool.
It's very cool. Yeah. So if, though, you're like, nope, that's not an option for me, there are payments. So we have a few that are grant payments or grant money. Mm-hmm. We're doing a lot of them right now. We have one where you put 1% down, and then we give you the 2% up to $4,500.
Oh, very cool.
So there's a $275 is the max purchase price on it, but it's like a really great program if you're kind of in that price point range and you qualify. That's a really great program. We have some where you can get $2,500. There's also, through the state of Iowa, there's the Iowa Finance Authority program that has down payment assistance. They either have a $2,500 or they have an actual second mortgage that you can put on that's up to 5% of the purchase price. Nice. So you could use 3% towards your down payment, and then you can come up with the other 2% and use it towards your closing costs or other items like that.
The best part about it too, when we write an offer, we can ask for seller concessions to help cover some closing costs too. So this is all in addition to anything that we can put into the offer too. This is just on the financing side. So there's other ways, even on the purchase side, to get you some assistance too at closing.
Correct. So. Yes. And so just so you know, though, like when you're talking about some people, because they're first-time home buyers, but maybe they've gotten a gift or they've saved their money and they just still think they want to use a first-time homebuyer program.
Yeah.
And it's not always then the best program for you, because sometimes either your rate or your costs or things are affected, or you don't have options
Exactly.
if you need to have that down payment assistance.
Yeah, a lot of my clients start on that path and then they look and see, and that's the great thing about Lisa is they don't just shove you into that program. If there's another program that would actually save you some money, they'll look at those too. I've had some other lenders that have just put them into the first-time home buyer and not asked any questions, and I looked at the actual cost to actually get there and stuff, and it wasn't probably as good a deal as it sounded like.
Right.
So that she can look at that and say, yeah, this is a good fit for you, or it's maybe the only fit sometimes to
Right.
get the cash that we need to actually buy the house. So
Yeah, and one of the other grant programs that is really great, it's actually is through the Iowa Finance Authority. If you are a veteran and if you have served during a certain period of time, there's a particular form that we look at your DD 214. I love working with our military. And so even if you're doing a VA home benefit loan, or if you're not, there's a $5,000 grant that you potentially qualify for.
yeah.
And that helps out a ton of our veterans, and it's really great. If you can only use it once, but
We've had a lot of VA buyers lately, and
yes.
it's just such a great program. I mean, you can do 0% down with a VA loan. I
Yes.
mean, there's USDA and VA. Those are the only options to get that low, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
VA
And you can use it more than once. So all you veterans out there, if
Yeah.
you've used it once, you can actually use it more than once.
They are a little stricter on appraisal, so that's one. I got one right now that we're going and looking at houses, and that's been in conversation every time with the chipped and peeling paint. We
Yep.
keep looking at older, cool, historic homes. That's what they're looking for, and it's been a little tougher on that. But for the right properties and everything, the VA is a fantastic program.
Yeah, it is.
So, and you generally get a little better rate out of it
Yeah.
too. Not only a better down payment, but better rate.
Even if you're putting 100% down, there's no MI.
Yeah, no mortgage insurance, which is
And
a
if
big deal.
actually if you get disability from the military, you also are exempt from the funding fee. So it really is 100%. So
And there's tax
and there's
on
tax.
the
So
backside too.
yeah,
The property
so
taxes can actually be reduced or
just
waived.
if you turn in your
depending on your
DD 214. Yeah.
So there's a lot of really cool things about that. So if you are a veteran, and we actually have a program that we utilize through Lisa for service members and first responders in general.
They
so
get a
that's another
discount in
program.
your closing costs.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it's a really good program, whether you're a nurse or a first responder
Yeah,
or
teacher.
or veteran or a teacher. Yeah, there's a lot of good options out there. Oh, let's talk a little bit too. We always get this question, right? Is how are rates arrived at? Like, how do we see a market rate out there, and then we actually get our pre-approval, and maybe it's different, maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. Like, how do we actually arrive at a rate for a pre-approval?
Sure. I think that's like a super common question. They're like, I just want the lowest rate. I'm like, do you really want the lowest rate? Because to get the lowest rate, so there's a rate that has no cost to it.
Yeah.
And then there's a rate.
And those are typically not the ones illustrated.
No,
When you see
you're-
marketing and
yeah.
advertising, they're not showing you the one with zero cost to get there.
No,
Let's
no.
be clear about that.
But sometimes it's the best one for you. But that's the rate that's out there. So they'll say, well, I'm like, well, what rate do you want? And I'm like, well, then it's going to cost you this much to get to that rate. So there's a rate that has no cost to it.
Mhm.
And then there's rates that have levels to them that there's a cost to get to that rate, which means your closing costs are a certain amount. And this is above and beyond what typical normal closing costs are. They're called discount points
Yep.
to buy down your interest rate to a certain point.
Makes
And that's called a long-term buy down. Like there's buy downs. That is not a temporary buy down. That is a fixed buy down that your rate then would not change over the life of your loan if you buy it down to that. But you have to be okay with the cost. So if you tell me, I want to bring $10,000 to closing, or I want to bring $20,000 to closing, or whatever, buying down your rate could be on top of that, or we got to move around your down payment or do something then that you're still bringing that amount of money to closing.
Sure.
So then there's buy downs. So not to get too in the weeds, but a buy down means that it's a temporary buy down, which means short term. So there's 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1. So it only is effective for 1 year. So say rates are at 7% and you do a 2-1 buy down. That means somebody's got to pay for it. There's a cost to pay for it. Nothing's free. So that means at 7%, the first year, your rate could be at 5%. The second year, your rate's at 6%. And then you're going to end up for the rest of the 28 years, you're going to be at 7%.
So in a higher interest rate environment, sometimes that makes sense.
It sometimes does. I will say that you need to be okay with the end payment at
Yep.
7%. Some people are in a job situation where they know my income is going to be increasing. I always say knowing that for sure is a little bit like, how do you know?
Yeah.
But there are people they're like, we just know that this is going to be increasing. So they love being at 5% that first year, going to 6%. But again, you have to be comfortable with that end rate.
Yeah.
So there's
sense.
permanent buy downs and then there's temporary buy downs.
Yeah.
Or there's not paying for a buy down
Yeah.
and being okay. Because I would say
Depends on mortgage forecast, right? Like,
it does.
are they going to trend down or are they going to trend up?
Yeah,
If,
and I
if you
think
think they're going to trend up, maybe you buy the rate now.
Yes.
And you lock yourself into something you're comfortable with for a 30-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage.
Yeah.
If you're maybe thinking they're going to trend down, then maybe save the money and wait to refinance, because it's probably a lot of times we'll see it's actually cheaper to refinance later on than it is to actually pay the points and buy the rate down.
Correct. Because how we do it is we always want to make sure here's your cost to buy down that rate. And if you're doing a permanent buy down, this is the savings you have per month, and this is the cost. And dividing that out, how long is it going to take you to recoup that cost?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're like, what, 6 years? I don't even know if I'm going to be in the house for 6 years,
Yeah.
right?
Average consumer's in it for 8 years.
Yes.
So like if you're going to be in it for less than that, is it worth actually?
And it's not
doing
even
that?
just when you're in it, it's like, how long are you going to keep the mortgage? Because not only is it in it, but are you going to, people refinance usually within 5 years is typical, 5 to 7 years. So, if you refinance, then you've lost that savings as well.
Makes sense.
So I think you just need, again, it's the knowledge of knowing what your options are.
So when we're going into the search, this is where we do typically a buyer consult, right? We maybe had an initial consult. A lot of times I'll get people started with a lender ahead of time because that's going to dictate a lot of things. So before we have a real in-depth conversation about their search and what we're really looking for, it's good to get that pre-approval knocked out.
Well, because then you know what
Yeah.
price of house you're looking for.
Yeah, and what town?
And what towns.
Do we have a town that qualifies for USDA or not? And so it really guides our search a lot. School districts guide our search a lot. So that's what we're going to sit down typically after the pre-approval, have that full buyer consult and set up the search together of what you're actually looking for. What is it that you need? Your must-haves, your want-to-haves, the things that you could live without. Then we're going to go through that. And we're going to set that search up for you. So rather than using some online system, Zillow, Realtor.com, or whatever, we're going to set you up in our portal, and it allows us to communicate back and forth with you better throughout the buying process, because you can mark your favorites. So you can mark the ones you actually want to go see. You can request the showings through our platform directly to it. It just sends me a text and like, hey, I know Jill wants to go look at a house this afternoon. So it's really good when we set up that search together and put in the parameters from the loan, your must-haves, your want-to-haves. And we're exploring some AI technology right now that would actually allow us to put in even more in-depth stuff. Like we want a yellow house. Like it can actually pick out that level of detail that we can't get with just the current searches, like a 3-bed, 2-bath. So there's some cool things coming, and we're always on the cutting edge with that. I was trying to implement as much technology to make your search really effective. And get stuff in your hands sooner, because that's really important. If we send you the search every 3 days and you're looking at a $250,000 house in, say, Ankeny, that's a really competitive price point. It's going to go really quick if it's in good shape. If it's sitting there for 60 days, there's probably something wrong with it, right? It's not sold right away. It's probably something wrong with it. So we want to make sure you see those as soon as they come to market. We see them. We reach out to you. We communicate back and forth. All the members of my team are going to have that same process in going through it with you. We would sit down at that point too and talk through the paperwork, so you feel comfortable when we get to the point of actually writing an offer on that ideal property, so you know what to expect. What's the process going to be like? What's the forms look like? What am I actually signing? There's a lot of agents that don't probably do a great job explaining that to you. So we want to make sure you're comfortable about that. What's radon with lead-based paint? What are the things that we need to consider? So that's all the things that we kind of have in that initial consult. Set up your search, and then we hit the ground running.
So if I go through a house and I'm like, myself and my partner, we decided to take a drive for the day, and I drive by a house and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a for sale sign. So should I call the sign, Chris, on my search, or
Call
what
me.
do I do?
Yeah,
I think
definitely call
a
me.
lot of people get confused by that. Or there's an open house and I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like what's the steps? Like I'm searching with you.
For sure. You're totally welcome to go through open houses. I mean, especially when you're trying to figure out what it is you really want. Sometimes it's helpful. I always tell people it's best though if I go with them, right? Because then I get a feel for what you're looking for too. It's really funny how many times spouses go into houses and they learn stuff about their spouse they never knew before. Is they had two very different opinions of what it was they wanted from a home. And when I'm there with them and they're talking through it, it's really helpful for me. If they had that experience at maybe an open house or something like that, and I didn't hear those things, I don't get that feedback, it's harder for me to help with their search and dial that in. And sometimes I hear the conversations and they don't necessarily know what they want. This spouse doesn't, and I hear it and I can give out some suggestions and we actually end up arriving on a happy medium. Or I know of maybe a listing that, hey, the ones we're looking at don't sound like a fit, but I mean, I just looked at this one the other day, this one might be a fit. So always recommend bringing us along. The other thing is if you find that ideal property, I'm still going to go look at it, right? Because I have to be able to advise you through an offer and I can't do that without seeing it.
I think you said something to me the other day that resonated. That was when I'm going through a search and I found a house that I love, I'm going through and I have all the emotion, right? Like I am in love with this house because I'm looking at this kitchen and I'm like, man, I can picture myself having a party in this house, right? You are the person who's the realist, right?
Yes.
So I loved how you described this. Like I've got the emotion, but you're going, oh my gosh, Lisa, these windows are old. I hope you have in your budget that you're going to have to replace these windows, or the ceilings are yellow, or something, right?
Yeah, it's so when we go through the home touring process with us, when we go through it, I always tell people, you keep your eyes up. I generally don't print out the listing description because we can get that anytime. We can get that before, we can get that after. I generally don't print it out for the showing itself because I want my clients to have their eyes up. I want them to look in everything in the house. I want them seeing, does this house fit for our family? Do we see ourselves in this kitchen? Do we see ourselves in this master bedroom? Like this is going to fit our furniture. It's going to be what we want for our kids. And does the house work, right? We can spend an hour in a house, but if it's not the right fit, then why did we spend an hour there just looking at everything that's maybe right or wrong with it? So I always tell my clients, keep their eyes up, look through it. Does it fit for you and your family? I'm going through it with a totally different viewpoint. I see a ton of houses. I know the market values. So I'm looking at it going through like, man, this is probably priced a little high for the condition it's in, or man, this is actually a really good deal. And then I'm going through looking and making a list of what's wrong with it. Like, what are the things, if they do like this house, does my client want to write an offer? What are the things we need to negotiate on? And I don't generally point those out unless there's something major. We don't point those out in the showing itself. I kind of let you, form your opinion of it. And then if you're interested in writing an offer, we talk through that. Like, here's the things that I noticed that we need to write in. Maybe we can get this negotiated because this plumbing stack really needs to be replaced and it hasn't. We've written those kinds of things into the offers up front rather than letting them hit at the home inspection. And my clients know that going into it. So there's multiple reasons there. We can write a better offer. If it gets accepted, fantastic. If it doesn't, then we maybe bring an offer up, we go to the home inspection, then we bring it up again if we need to, because it's like, hey, we have another professional opinion at that point.
Can I bring up something? And that, like, you just kind of touched on it right here. I've gone through the house. I love it. And you were just talking about the offer. And so I think when you're doing your real estate and you're putting in an offer, talk about the different things that are, some people think it's all about the price.
Sure.
But I think it's not. I mean, I think
there's different things that we can manipulate within an offer.
Like what's important to the seller.
So I always go through and run a CMA, a market analysis, on any of the properties that we're going to buy. So we kind of start with that. Is it priced well? Is it within reason, right? Because if it's your perfect house, it's worth what you're willing to pay at the end of the day. So I'm going to look at it, will it appraise? Will it appraise for your loan? And if it's not, then we need to have that conversation and we write the offer knowing that sometimes. It just is what it is. If we're in multiple offers especially, it's got to be your comfort level. If you're comfortable doing, we'll do it. But I never push anybody in that. And then going back to the offer piece itself, there's closing date. Sometimes that's most important. We got a kid that's graduating into May. There's another offer that's similar and they're wanting to close in April, but your kid doesn't graduate until into May. The offer with the right closing date makes a difference sometimes. It's little things.
Maybe they're building a house.
The type of financing, they're building a house, so they need some flexibility with that close date.
Seller's concessions.
No seller's concessions. So are we asking for seller credit to help buy down rate or go towards closing costs?
Home inspection.
There's different forms of a home inspection. Typically, we'd have a 7-10 day window to do a full home inspection, go back with major structural, major mechanical repairs. But there's also option 2 on both the Ames and Des Moines MLS purchase agreements now that allow us to have basically a pass-fail. And if we're comfortable with what's found in it, we can move forward. But if not, we still have the option to walk away. So it's a really nice happy medium, especially in a competitive situation. And then there's as is, which I don't generally recommend that. If you're a seasoned property buyer and you're comfortable with it, or maybe you're a contractor and you're comfortable with it, you're like, I can fix anything in this house, that's on you. But I generally won't recommend my clients ever go that route unless they really know what they're doing with the house. They got some money to take care of things if they come up. Maybe it's newer construction, we feel good about it. Maybe we'll have a builder's warranty with it. Those are all things that come up. So we'll talk through all that. And then sometimes there's stuff we want included too with the sale. So that becomes a point of negotiation too. Maybe there's a piece of equipment, like a woodworking shop has equipment there.
I don't like those things.
Lenders don't like those things, but those are things that we have to work with, right? So we typically will try to figure out a price outside of the sale for those things. Maybe we're buying an acreage, we need the mower that the guy has. So we'll try to negotiate those things, but we typically have to do those separate from the purchase agreement. And a lot of that's because of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac backed loans and lending requirements. We can't roll some of those things in.
But I would say
but all that goes
that's what
into it.
makes your realtor be, I mean, they're your negotiator.
Yeah.
They really are so important because they're helping you through all those little steps on your purchase contract of negotiating all those different things that you might not have even thought about.
Yeah, and it's really interesting is we know if we're buying enough properties, we know maybe like new construction, maybe they won't budge on price. They've been pretty firm on price, but maybe they'll give us some concessions, or maybe they'll give us an entire appliance package that doesn't normally come with new construction. So those are other things that we've negotiated into the offer. It's not necessarily with the loan perspective, but the builder gives a credit to an appliance company for $5,000 to go fill the house with appliances. That's a nice concession. Yeah. So there's different things for different properties. Sometimes it's getting repairs taken care of. We'll negotiate those in, and that's a point too. And we tell them up front, we're going to ask for these things, but then maybe we're going to go as is on the rest of the inspection. So there's different cogs and wheels that we can turn essentially to make the offer attractive to the seller. And it's not just about the price. Sometimes we even go higher and get the credits, and that makes more sense too. So it's your first instinct's not to do that. As a buyer, you're like, I want the best price, right? But we had the other day, we needed that seller credits. We actually raised the price to get seller credits, and it made the whole deal come together. Let's talk real quick about contingencies. So one of the biggest ones is inspection. So we typically have that 7 to 10 day period. We're going to do a home inspection, get a sewer scope, get a radon test. All those things can be done in that 10 day period. If we need to review HOA docs, that can be part of that. If we have a due diligence for some zoning thing that we need for a property, we can do that during the 10 day period. So those are all in that period. We want to cram those in up front. During that period, because basically at that point in time, you have earnest money that's going to the seller saying you're going to proceed forward with that contract. It's protected in that 10-day window to come back to you if you're backing out due to something that was discovered during those inspections. And then after that, the only other contingency in most deals is going to be finance. And so that's really important to know that your loan's going to go through. And the seller wants to know that, so that pre-approval goes there. But that that buyer financing piece is important. We've had people lose jobs. Your financing falls apart. That contingency protects you if you have that finance contingency in there. And then there's also an appraisal contingency. That's part of the financing, really. Like, you're not going to get a loan without having an appraisal 95% of the time.
Right.
Yeah, you gotta have a lot of cash down essentially. So if the home doesn't appraise, that is essentially a point of renegotiation in order to keep the financing together. Sometimes you as a buyer, we love this house, we want this house. Sometimes we can bring in more cash to the table to make the loan work itself, right? Because the bank just wants to know that their loan's protected and it's going to be able to be resold later.
Right. The appraisal is not, so people get the appraisal and the inspection mixed up. The appraisal is really looking at the value of the house. So they're making sure what you're paying for it is what it's worth.
Exactly.
Except for the government loans, which have some safety issues. But the primary reason of your appraisal is to make sure that your loan is covered.
Yeah, the VA appraisal, I get that confused a lot. I have a lot of VA buyers that think that the inspection is the appraisal and vice versa. And I think it's the way it's communicated a lot of times.
Right.
But yeah, we have inspection and we have appraisal. Right. Two separate things. Now, if the home doesn't appraise at value, it's a point of renegotiation. A lot of times we will go back to the seller and ask them to bring that price down. It's not always how it works out, but that's typically the route that it goes, because the saying goes, if it doesn't appraise for my loan, it's really not going to appraise for another loan. Because all the loan program types, even though I have a few idiosyncrasies between them of how the appraisal process goes. They all generally are going to be looking at comparable properties from the last 2 years from a close area. They have certain criteria that they have to use, and if it doesn't fit the criteria and pricing with one for FHA, it's probably not going to be for conventional either. The life safety things sometimes come in and play with it, but generally speaking, if it doesn't appraise for me, it won't appraise for somebody else. So, and then some of the appraisals even attach to the lending program, right? So like if you have an FHA appraisal and another buyer comes by with an FHA loan, they're going to have to use that same appraisal because it's in that system too.
Right.
So, so yeah, it's typically the seller is going to give us some concessions at that point to keep the deal together, to keep that financing.
Right. Again, back to that negotiation, why you want somebody with you
Yeah.
to be negotiating for you. So it doesn't happen. So I'll just like throw this out because you're probably thinking, oh my gosh,
Doesn't
my
happen real
house
often,
isn't
yeah.
going to price out. So that's
why we run that comparable market analysis
Yes.
when we write the offer. Because if I think it's going to be close, we'll let you know, right? Like if we're going crazy on a multiple offer situation, I'm just going to tell you right now, we got some protection there as a buyer
Right.
when it comes time for appraisal. Because if it doesn't appraise, even if we're in multiple offers, we're going to go back and renegotiate that appraisal point and use that to our advantage. So.
Right. Yeah. So I was just thinking about one other contingency that I think comes up because you're going to get it from me on the financing side potentially is if I need to sell my house before I can buy a new house.
That's a great
Or I
contingent,
want
yeah.
to sell my house before I buy a new house.
Yep.
I think that's a big contingency that some states don't even allow it. Here in Iowa, we do allow it.
Yeah, in our area, we do them a little different too. Some states you'll write the subject to sale offer, and you have the house is yours essentially for so many days. As long as you get your other property under contract in like 30 days, you're good. In our area, it's really common to have 24 or 48-hour first right of refusal. Is essentially all it
Right.
is.
So that means so I put in my offer, and on a pre-approval side, I'm looking. Is it a want of selling my house or is it a need? Some people are in a need. I can't do anything unless I sell my house.
Exactly.
And other people I really don't want 2 mortgages, so I would rather sell my house before I buy a new house.
So if you want to have the options to not sell, you need to have that as a backup plan, right? You need to know, can you do a bridge loan? Can you do a totally different purchase and
Put less
have
money
a
down
mortgage
or something.
Yeah.
So say that the house, somebody else now, because they can still keep it on the market, right? So it's on the market.
When
and
you have a
now
subject to sale, it's
another person's come in, right?
Yep.
And they've now said, I want that house, but I have an offer
Exactly.
on it. So then what happens?
So typically it's going to be a 24-hour first right of refusal. So that other offer comes in, they're going to send us notice, and once we receive notice, we would have 24 hours to either perform and say we're going to move forward with the purchase or give the other buyer the property.
Or you're like, I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out. I can't do it. And it's typically 24 hours. Sometimes we're lucky we get it up to 48, sometimes even 72 if we got a nice seller that really wants to sell. But it's usually 24 hours. So we really got to have our ducks in a row and plan B. Or no, we're just gonna have to give up the property. So
I think that's one of the biggest things on a contingency. It's kind of probably one of the most, I don't say it's common, but if you do need to sell your house or want to sell your house, as your lender, we just want to have that backup before we even get there to know if it's an option or if you just know you're going to have to give up the house if somebody comes in with that 24
I
hour
always tell my
notice.
clients, know your options, right?
Yes.
Like it doesn't mean you're gonna do it, doesn't mean you want to do it, doesn't even mean you can maybe in your mind afford it sometimes. If you can get a bridge loan, you can probably afford it, right? They're not gonna give a bridge loan away lightly, but you need to know your options. You need to know the cost. There's a cost associated with getting a bridge loan. So maybe you just don't even want to pay $1,000 or whatever to get a bridge loan,
right?
Whatever it is. So
comes back to your options, just knowing, being informed and knowing what to do.
Yeah, if you know your options, you're a well-informed consumer, and we can make better decisions through that purchase transaction. And then sometimes we get into those situations, and instead of being subject to sale, we flip the script, and we'll actually list the house subject to finding home of choice. We'll get an accepted offer on their house that they're selling first, and then we go buy. And so that's kind of a fun situation sometimes. We can flip the script on the whole subject to sale thing and put ourselves in the driver's seat a little bit more that way too. So we just got to get creative, and it all goes into that offer and your specific situation.
So Chris, earnest money. So we're talking about purchase contracts.
Yeah. So within a normal purchase transaction, we're going to have earnest money of some amount, right? And it's good faith that you're going to proceed forward with the purchase of the property. It's showing that you're a qualified buyer and that it's consideration for the contract.
Means I'm serious. Really,
Yes, you're
right?
serious. You're putting this in, and it's not just, it's worth more than the paper that it's written
Yep.
on, essentially. So the earnest money typically is going to start at $500 to $1,000. Even if we're buying a less expensive home with 0% down, we're going to need $500 to $1,000 for most transactions. The old rule of thumb was 1% of the home value would typically be what you put in for earnest. But you know, we typically will do $2,500, $5,000, even on like a $500,000 home. And $1 million home typically only go up to maybe $7,500 or $1,000. So it just depends on the deal, and that's one of those things we can show strength of offer with. So it's a point of negotiation.
Part of that negotiation, yeah.
We've even gone as far in multiple offer situations to say so much of that earnest money might be non-refundable earnest money.
Oh, right.
To show
Because
it's a
the only way I can get my earnest money back
Contingencies.
is contingencies that we talked about.
Yeah, so that earnest money goes into a trust account in the state of Iowa. We're a trust account state versus an escrow state. So typically speaking, it's going to go into the trust account of the listing brokerage, and it's going to sit there until close. That would become part of your down payment on your house.
Or closing costs.
Or
If
closing
I'm
costs,
doing
yeah.
100% financing, then that earnest money counts towards my cash to close, which could be some of the closing costs.
Yeah.
Or, so in our end on financing, earnest money is one of the things that you can actually get money back at closing. If you were doing a VA USDA loan at 100% and you have seller's concessions, then you could get your earnest money back at closing.
Yeah. And so that's your money, right?
Yep.
If you got cold feet and just walked away from the deal without any contingency, that is the seller's money. If we do it during that inspection period, that's protected during that inspection period. So we'll do whatever we can to get that earnest money back if it's due to a contingency within the offer. So that's really important, that we're on top of that contingency period and what those contingencies are in the specific deal to make sure we protect that earnest money, and give you confidence that you could put more down to differentiate your offer. So it's a good deal. So we got an accepted offer. So,
Yay!
yeah,
Yay!
hey, we did it. Whether it was one house or 68 homes that we looked at, we did it, right? We got an accepted offer. It can be a long process. Just know that the normal process is you don't go into one house and buy it. I have some buyers that feel like they just go into one house. It's going to be the one. No.
Usually you might have
8, 10,
multiple
12.
offers.
Yeah. Especially in competitive market, you might be beat out a couple times even.
Yeah.
It might not even be finding the right place. You might find multiple places you like, rate multiple offers, get beat out, and we finally get one, right?
Which makes it even more exciting when you're like, hey, they accepted it. Let's go.
So it's just it's a process. It always is, and everyone's different. And times of the year are different. Sometimes we have no inventory to look at. Other times we have a ton of inventory to look at. And then that usually makes it easier when we have more homes to go look at. It's easier to find one. When we're in a low inventory market, it can be tough. But we got the offer accepted, right? So now we're going to give the purchase agreement over to Lisa. Lisa's going to start the lending process. And I always tell my clients the most important thing, we're going to go through this inspection in the next 10 days. But besides that, communicate with the lender. That is your job. Talk to the lender. Line up your move, if you need to get movers involved and how you're going to get into the house, figure out those logistics, but communicate with the lender.
So I'm going to say that when you're got your accepted offer, that insurance has been changing a lot right now.
Yeah.
And so your call is to your insurance agent to find out your premium, because remember that's part of your monthly payment for most people. And so calling your insurance agent is great. The reason we ask you for so much up front is because now you have an accepted offer. And so we want to make the lending process go really smooth.
Yep.
So depending how long you've been in it, we might need updated items, might need an updated pay stub or an updated bank statement. But now we are going to order that appraisal. We're going to get you to the closing table. So we've started the process. There's a lot of things that happen on the backside, but we are going to try to make it as easy as possible for you to get to the closing table, because you're going to be doing inspections, you're going to be getting your insurance, you're going to be packing, you're going to be doing all the things, right, while still keeping your job. So I will say that as a lender, on the bottom of all my emails, it says, don't quit your job. If you're going to change jobs, talk to your lender. Don't go. Most common is maybe the washer and dryer doesn't come with the house. I'm going to go to a certain appliance store and they have 0% financing. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get a washer and dryer. No, don't do that yet. Because remember, your credit is a big part of the process. So
Don't become self-employed in the middle of a transaction.
yes, don't. Yeah, same with your job, right? Don't quit it. Don't become self-employed. Talk to your lender before you do
Don't
anything.
buy your car.
You are under
close.
contract, and your pre-approval is a snapshot in time that you are pre-approved, looking and having your life look like this. So if you make any changes within that pre-approval, you need to talk to your loan officer and ask if it's okay before you go do something.
And life things happen, right? I mean,
For
I've had
sure.
a client, their car died in the middle of the transaction. They
you
had
call.
to go get another one, but call the lender first, because in that situation, they were able to go get another car, and it wasn't going to make the monthly payment change. Their DTI stayed the same. Everything worked out.
Yeah.
But we wanted to clear it before we did that. And so just communicate with the lender. That's the biggest thing in that
Yeah.
process.
So then we're working towards close. Oh,
You brought up one thing that I just totally forgot. How long is pre-approval actually good for?
Oh yeah, so pre-approvals are good for 60 days, but super easy to update. So depending on your situation, like I said, another pay stub, another bank statement. I have people updating their pre-approvals all the time. Super easy. If your credit's good for 120 days, that's one that maybe we have to look at again.
Sure.
But super easy to update your pre-approval.
Yeah, I've had clients literally looking for 2 or 3 years, and if you get that pre-approval, you just keep updating it. It's not a hard thing to do, right? The initial thing's difficult, updating is a lot less difficult.
Yeah.
And literally clients have gone 2 or 3 years, we find the right house. If you have that pre-approval and that right house pops up, you're ready to go. The worst thing in the world is when you don't have that. The right house pops up and it's a Saturday at 8 o'clock and you got to get an offer in, and it's like nobody can get a pre-approval turned in an hour on a Saturday night. So
Right.
it's just hard.
Yeah.
So we want to
So-
have those ready to go and
Yeah.
ready to put you in a spot to win. So
Right. So you've won. We're back to winning.
we're back to winning.
Back to winning. So we're going to get you to the closing table.
Yep.
So we're working hard on the back end on so many things that most people have no idea that we're doing. That's what we're doing. And closing day, so we're in Iowa. Closing day looks, we are what we call a wet funding state. And what that means is that when you close with us, your realtor typically is there, your lender is there, and an attorney or somebody representing that attorney's office is at the closing table to go through documents with you, is kind of typical.
Yep.
And what's going to happen is when we get to closing, you're going to get a notification from us saying you're clear to close. The realtors on both sides have looked through all the numbers. We're going to give you your final number. Big question I have is always, if you're bringing money to closing, people think that they can just write a check. They feel like they can just Venmo that money, Zelle it, all these different ways. And the answer is no. A lot of people right now also have online accounts. So their savings and things are not an actual physical bank anymore. It's something else. So you have to have a cashier's check or a wire are the two different forms of sending your money to that attorney's office for closing.
And I always recommend cashier's checks.
Oh,
That's my preference. And
he has a preference.
Yeah.
I don't have a preference.
yeah,
Wires, you just need to make sure that they're legit. So that's a big form of fraud right now.
be always call before you wire money. Verify that you're sending it the right place. Let's
Correct.
just leave it at that, because that's why I like cashier's checks. Is paper. It's
Right.
there. Yeah.
But I would say online accounts now don't have that option.
Yeah, that's the downside of
So
those.
I had a guy one time come and he was like, oh crap, I forgot, right? He just logged on to my computer and sent his money on his online account. It was super slick.
Yeah.
So, but you cannot just write a check, Venmo, or Zelle your money to the attorney. It's either a wire or a cashier's check. You're going to sit at the table. You're going to sign a whole bunch of papers. Some of them are going to be notarized, so you need to have an updated form of ID. So make sure your driver's license or your passport is up to date. Typically, people don't look at them a lot. You're going to sign a lot of papers. And at the end, here in a wet funding state, it's fun because you get the keys right at the closing. So
Yep.
Before the closing, you're doing a walkthrough with your agent.
Yeah, we typically do a walkthrough either the night before or first thing in the morning. I always like having them close to close, because it's always the seller's issue to resolve any problems prior to close, right? we can even delay closing if we have to because we found something weird going on. I mean, we've had storms go through. We found water in the basement. We've had a furnace die.
Right. You're going to make sure
Water
the
heater.
house is in the condition when you walk
Yeah,
to
when
it
we
in
do the
first
final
place,
walkthrough, it's
right?
supposed to be in the same condition it was when we wrote the offer. It's supposed to
No
be,
surprises.
yeah, it's supposed to be as represented, right? We're not going to see any changes. They didn't pull, I had a tree pulled out of a backyard. I mean, all kinds of weird things happen. So that's why we see it closer to close, the better, because the sellers can't change the property at that point. It is what we're taking possession of. So I always like to do those as close to close as possible. Sometimes, we find some issues. It makes the closing day a little complicated, but it's better to do it that way and have the seller remedy the situation than do a final walkthrough like a week before, and then we get to close and you've already owned the house and now there's an issue and it's debating whose problem it was at that point.
Right. So at closing, so you've done your walkthrough, we've signed papers, and if everything, you're going to get what's called an abstract at the end of closing. It's very unique to the state of Iowa. It tells the history of your property. You actually sign for that typically, depending what county that you're in the state of Iowa, but you will now have that in your possession or it'll be held somewhere.
Yep. And if the lender sends it off for final abstracting, you might get it a few weeks after close.
Oh, yeah, we don't do that anymore, but.
Yeah, it just depends on the lender.
Yeah. So yeah, depends on who you're working with. You should work with me. Anyway, at closing then, Chris usually has the keys and he's going to have, tell you where the extra keys are in the house. And you're going to get those at the end of our 30 to 40. So closing lasts 30 to 45 minutes.
Yep.
And you're going to get all those keys or all that information at the end of our closing time.
Yep. So that is your move-in day, essentially.
Yeah.
That's the time for you to take possession of the property. All the utilities, insurance, everything needs to be in your name, ready that day, and then
Cable,
you move
internet,
on.
important things.
Repairs. We sometimes get questions. We can do stuff if it's part of the real estate transaction. If you're needing repairs done, they get done there. But if it's like a renovation and it's going to be like your property, the moment you get the keys, that's when you can start doing those. So not before.
Yeah. Okay. And if you have questions, like obviously there's lots of moving pieces to buying it, which is why you want somebody that you enjoy working with, because you're going to talk to your lender and your realtor a lot during the transaction, to ask questions. Like, so you're watching this right now and you're part of our homebuyer seminar. So we might have mentioned something that maybe you'd like us to delve deeper into or anything like that.
Drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
With any of these things. It's a
for
lot
sure.
of information.
So
And
I would say
and
reach out.
specific too, right?
Right?
Like,
Yeah.
so much of this whole process, there's generalities. We're talking a lot in generalities. And your home buying process is a very specific thing. Your loan program, the house you're looking for, your budget, it's specific. So today is generalities, but obviously give us a call.
Yeah.
And we can get very specific with you and what your actual situation looks like, what your home journey is going to be. Hey everybody, thanks for coming to the seminar today on buying a home. It's Chris Betts with the Betts team at RE/MAX Real Estate Center.
And I am Lisa Sieversyk, a loan officer with Global State Mortgage. We really appreciate you hanging with us and being with us here today.
And learning all about the home buying process.